I'm just going to briefly touch upon the economic landscape that we are in, what impacts my views are, and obviously we'll probably debate to some extent, and a very short view of the political landscape, any future trends that we see, and a couple of points on how to stay ahead in this environment, because there's lots really happening. You can hear all the buzzwords, and you might see a couple on my presentation, but there's definitely a lot happening here. So I start off with the stock market, obviously from a macroeconomic trend. You can clearly see that NASDAQ is sitting at over 6,500 points in the index. And one thing, you always look at the stock market because it's always going to be the first indicator in a downturn, as well as the way the economy is going to move and every other indicator. So we see the NASDAQ pretty at all-time highs. You can see the Dow Jones here sitting at actually 23,000 today, 10-year trend. So all highs. I mean, we all like it when it's high, but I'm sure there's going to be some turning point and some low at some point, but it's always good to know where we're heading there. You can see the interest rates. The good part is 1.16%, still pretty low, and they're able to keep this at this level because inflation is still under 2%. So the interest rates are very important because it creates liquidity and more credit and more spend, and so hopefully that continues to remain reasonably at lower levels than it used to be. I like to look at this especially from a hotel perspective. We did see that there's more or less some level of stabilization here on the euro to the USD, actually USD to euro. So this is where it sits at right now from an exchange rate perspective. Obviously, you can choose a number of different currencies, and we can see it's all over the place. Especially, you can see the weakness in the pound, which has gained some strength right now. But I'll come to the correlation. Obviously, we see a strong correlation between travel, inbound or outbound, based on exchange rates, especially in some of the cities that we used to look at, like New York City or San Francisco or Miami and stuff like that. Raj is obviously very happy being on the airline side. We've seen fuel prices obviously sort of stabilize at a level and less supply, and you can see the pricing. Airlines continue to have a really good trend. And I actually put this in here because I was saying from a political perspective, if you look at how the NASDAQ trended under Democratic or Republican presidents, it's interesting to see where Clinton was. Obviously he finished lower towards the end, and Obama close to around 210% growth over the term. And then you have Reagan and Bush, and we'll see what happens with where Trump is going here. So the next slide is just a slide because we're talking about it, but this is our top political factors. So I mean, we're talking about North Korea. That's the instability that we see. So I had to just put this in there because this is what's on the internet in the digital age, and people are talking about that. So to summarize, the top factors that we look at, we see the market's all-time high, unemployment obviously at a new low, and rates are very attractive. Exchange rates are stable. Fuel prices also stable right now, and GDP, you could see Q2 was a nice growth of 2.6% versus a 1.3% in the first quarter. So it's a nice increase over there, and inflation is under control. And we see some level of optimism on future, if there are tax cuts on or infrastructure spending, if that happens there. So there are really good positive factors there that we're seeing on the macroeconomic trends. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of this translated, and I'll focus a little more on the hotel side, but this is CBRE obviously released their RevPAR trends, and you see the growth rates of 5 to 6 to 8%, and then you start seeing in 2016 slightly dropping, and their forecast for going forward is really not a great, like 2-ish% growth rates. A big reason is potentially because of the huge supply that's come into the market. So from a hotel perspective, there's still a lot of growth, but from a RevPAR perspective, there's definitely pressure on due to the supply. and other factors. But this is their general view and I'm sure Sagar will have his own views on where this is going. So this is interesting. This is the latest trends that we've seen from US tourism. We can see that obviously Canada is healthy. I wonder why Mexico has gone down. Actually, it's gone down very, very heavily. We can see a lot of the exchanges on immigration. The UK, a big chunk of it, decrease is consistent with the Brexit. We've seen it before as soon as it happened because of the weakness of the pound. We've seen Brazil, obviously, because of what's happening in the economy over there, a big decline there, not able to figure out why India is there. But this is pretty much, it's an important metric from a hotelier's perspective in key gateway markets to figure out what's happening. I mean, it's interesting when you look at Miami. Venezuela was a really, really big source market, but it's pretty much dried up because of what's happening in that country. So important to know what's going on around apart from just what's happening in North America. I've really tried to focus on this recently because many years ago, we kept talking about e-commerce. You know, we have somebody in e-commerce, and we have marketing, and so on and so forth. I'm a big believer right now that you really can't talk about just e-commerce. I mean, all commerce has to be almost digital. It has to have a touch point. And we're talking about the digital economy, and we heard those buzzwords earlier, getting to around $24 trillion by 2020. So if you want to be part of it, it's time to actually embrace it very well. This is studies done by Accenture. I'll add that to the source over there. Looking at internet penetration, I mean, you can see the US, Japan, UK, Canada, all-time highs. Overall global average is around 50%. So there's still a lot of penetration that's going to happen across other countries, but healthy in a lot of the developed countries, so that's really interesting there. So you have to, if this is the penetration levels, it's important to embrace the digital part of it. Everybody should, because it's happening around us. I think it was mentioned earlier on in the first session about the big four. So these are the biggest white sharks, as we call them. So same set of folks: Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. Very, very important for travel. If they're not in a big way, they will get into it in a big way. It's very, very obvious. And this is actually interesting to see. Again, when you look at trends, you take the big giants on the left, AT&T, Walmart, ExxonMobil, which was the largest at one point in market cap, and you see their growth rates, and then you look at what's happening between Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple. So you can see where the trends are going. So again, spot the trends to see how to embrace it even more than you're already doing probably today. Interesting. I mean, Brazil, 4.5 hours spent on the mobile device. I mean, that's what people spend on it. So you want to target Brazil, Brazilian customers for your hotels or any other travel or cruise or any other industry. You really need to get your mobile strategy in order for Brazil. Don't just go out there and have a desktop strategy. You can see if they're spending 4.5 hours there, you need to clearly understand that. So it's a question of seeing what trends are there and how do you adopt that to your own business because you can actually get the insights from here. I like Dilbert, so I put this in here because if you see that very clearly, there's so much happening on the internet. In this case, if you can read it yourself, it's actually an interesting one. So I like the last part myself, so showed myself out, and then you clearly see that. The reason why I put this here is, and also I like the CFO, CEO constant debate that happens of cutting costs. This is really great. What happens if we don't and they stay and they're working without any training? I think focusing on the people in this age is important. So hone your skills, get the right people. That's clear that we need to do that. We've heard all the big terms, so I'm just going to touch on just a few. I'm not going to get into the. I started off with macro. I talked about specific insights you can gain and you have to infer from those insights for your businesses. I'm just going to talk about a few things that were done even at a more granular level, which actually made an impact. And this is the things that you can do. So this is in the hotel industry. On Google, on search, the hotel that we were running general ads like the Row Hotel or the Park Lane Hotel in Times Square near Central Park. Those are all great terms that you can do. And this is something, a new technology that is being tested out. It's called real dynamic ads, wherein you can actually start feeding off typically what you've seen, what Booking.com or Expedia puts on the OTA side. But if you start feeding them into actual search terms and say we have 5 rooms at a price point, and as you can see, you're 88 or 98% full, within the ads itself, we notice and I've just taken one hotel, there was a 68% lift in conversion rates. And that's a direct correlation of seeing what exists out there in technology, and can you adapt that to search, which is still, we know, one of the biggest drivers of demand, and we have obviously social and the rest of it there. But it's just breaking it down from macro all the way to a granular level. Look for these things which will make a big difference here. We did the same thing for on the banners, where you can actually, that feeds off dynamically, and whenever you put the dynamic rates, travelers get to trust it and book. It's just a very simple thing and a tweak, and this is what it results in. I just wanted to touch upon this in terms of again, this is innovation. We talked about big data, cloud computing. We are very focused on this in some of the companies that we invest in. This is a case in which we're taking big data, obviously heavy cloud computing, and predicting what occupancies will look like for markets around the world on a daily basis. So again, using all the latest trends in there, innovation, embracing that in this fast-moving landscape. Key points, how to stay ahead of the curve. Obviously, I emphasized on this earlier on, is embracing the digital economy. Broad, as Del said, but get into the specifics if you have to. Innovation is key because, I mean, just so much going on, and you can't even keep track of it. And people, obviously, training is a very important part. And one thing I would say is we're so used to sticking to tried and tested. Yes, do it, conventional approaches, but keep looking out for even small companies that I'm actually surprised to see in my new role investing in startups, that some of these small companies come up with the brilliant ideas, which if you embrace them quickly and they do well, they could really be a big win for your business too. So look at some of these companies very well. And I think that's it from my side, and hopefully this is the way the evolution of man looks like. Thank you.
Excellent.